In the woods of Switzerland, a 6-foot-tall figure in a gas mask and cloak stalked the woods. In another forest, a man and his grandson froze as a 12-foot-tall creature roared like a lion. And in Oregon, a town was terrified by a mechanical scream that echoed through the night. To this day, no one knows what it was. These are disturbing forest discoveries that no one can explain. Back in the late 90s, people living near the village of Mals in Switzerland started seeing something strange in the woods. It was not an animal. It was this tall figure, about 6'3", dressed head to toe in a dark boiler suit and a greenish camouflage cloak with an old gas mask. People started calling it Le Loyon, or the ghost of Mals. One woman said she came across it quietly picking flowers on a trail. When it realized she was watching, it froze, and she said it had flowers in its hands. I saw it clearly. It was not human in how it moved. The sightings went on for years. People snapped multiple photos of this person. Then the media started reporting on the sightings, and Le Loyon became a household name, in Switzerland anyway. Then in 2013, hikers found the cloak and mask abandoned in the woods, along with a handwritten note titled Death Certificate and Testament of the Ghost of Mals. In it, the writers said they were displeased by the fame the photos had brought, and no one's seen this person since. From Reddit user I'm an effin' turtle comes the story of the Howling. My dad used to go camping at his grandfather's as a kid. Now there were bears in the area, but Grandpa didn't take no crap. My dad had watched this man chase off bears with a pitchfork. One night they headed to the tree line for firewood, caught some eyes flickering in the flashlight beam. No big deal, except they were around 12 feet off the ground, and although they couldn't make out the details, the thing was massive. And even though bears will stand on their hind legs, my dad said something just felt off, and there was a terrible putrid smell that suddenly appeared. His grandpa fired a shot off, but it didn't even flinch. Then it roared. My dad said it sounded like a lion's roar mixed with a woman screaming, but its head didn't seem to move. At this point, my grandfather had told my father to effing run, but his voice was so shaky and choked it took him 2 tries to get the words out. They booked it back to the house over a mile away, which was impressive for the 70-ish-year-old man, who was white as a sheet, shaking for the next couple hours. They heard the howl one more time an hour or so later. They never camped out there again. In February 2016, people living in Forest Grove, Oregon started hearing a sound no one could explain. It would show up at night, a long, high-pitched noise that some described as a mechanical scream. Others said it sounded like a giant flute playing off pitch. It lasted anywhere from a few seconds to a few minutes. People started posting videos of it online, and soon the whole town was talking about it. The city's fire marshal, Dave Nemier, said, "We don't think it's a safety risk, but we also don't know what's making it." The Department of Forestry checked their equipment, no issues. The gas company said there were no leaks. Pacific University physics professor Andrew Dawes tried mapping where the sound had been heard, but he said his results were inconclusive. The police got around 200 calls about this. By the end of February, the sound suddenly stopped. The last report came on February 27th, and after that, silence. About 5 years ago, a Redditor called Poor Judgment shared a story about something that happened while working deep in the forests near Temiskaming Shores in Ontario. They'd spent their whole life in the woods, working as an ecologist, and had always felt comfortable out there. But that changed on one particular job. They and a coworker were sent to collect data in an old logging area that hadn't been touched since 1995. The drive-in took them down a rough, overgrown road full of mud pits, until eventually they had to park and walk the last half hour in on foot. At first, everything was normal. It was just another work day, until both of them started to feel uneasy. The Redditor said their chest felt tight, like they were being watched. And then their coworker suddenly said, "I have a terrible feeling about this place." Not long after, they both started hearing voices. 2 people talking somewhere in the trees. The problem was, there shouldn't have been anyone around for miles. The voices faded in and out for a few seconds at a time, then stopped completely. As they kept walking, they noticed trees snapping and bent in weird ways. Some spots had a single tree broken in the middle, while the rest were untouched. And there was this creepy circle of evergreens around crushed poplars. He attached images to his post, which we're showing you now. Steve and Beth Lee thought they were finally settling into the quiet life they'd always wanted. They bought a cabin in Black Forest, Colorado in 1991. Steve had fallen in love with the area years earlier while driving trucks through the state. Beautiful pine forests, fresh air, and the peace and quiet. It made him feel at home. But that calm did not last long. Within weeks of moving in, strange things started happening. The Lees would come home to see flashing lights moving around their living room, which Beth said looked like the 4th of July. They heard footsteps across the roof, chains rattling and lights flicking on and off. Even worse, the house sometimes filled with a chemical smell that burned their throats. Steve assumed it was someone messing with him, so he installed motion sensors, alarms, and cameras. But none of this helped. The alarms went off more than 60 times, and every time police came out, they found nothing. But the Lees had captured some pretty strange footage on their property, including this video of a bizarre orb. In 1995, desperate for answers, the Lees reached out to the TV show Sightings, who sent a crew to investigate. The show's psychic, Echo Bodine, immediately said she sensed a man's spirit inside the home and 20 or more others in the bedroom. During filming, Beth suddenly felt pinned down by an unseen force, and a camerawoman collapsed crying, saying something was, quote, inside her. Later, Steve noticed there was a beam of light pointed at his head in a photo that had been taken. The next morning, he woke up with a painful lump there. They also contacted a Hopi shaman who called the property a rainbow vortex, a supposed doorway between worlds. Decades later, the Lees still reported lights, voices, and faces appearing in mirrors. This next story comes from Redditor Genesis Pro Tech, who said he joined a search and rescue effort for a group of missing teenagers who hadn't returned from a camping trip. Since he and his friend knew the area well, one of their search and rescue buddies asked them to help. The two of them set out on foot, heading deep into the forest in the direction the teens were last seen. They hiked for hours, about 35 kilometers in, before things started to feel off. The deeper they went, the stranger it got. They started seeing sticks carved into spears, jammed into the ground, odd markings carved into tree trunks, and a child's stuffed toy hanging from a noose high up in a branch. None of this made sense. This spot was far from any road or hiking trail. What really got to them was how fresh everything looked. Whoever had made it had been there just a few hours earlier. Still, they were focused on finding the missing group, so they pressed on, set up camp for the night. The next morning, as sun came up, Genesis Pro Tech noticed a torn piece of fabric snagged on a tree and some footprints nearby. Looked like they were close, but before they could follow the trail, their radio crackled. The missing teens had been found 20 kilometers east. They were relieved, but then they're like, well, wait, what's all this weird stuff we've been seeing? They hiked back out of that forest fast. From a now deleted Reddit user comes a story about a terrifying encounter in the Appalachians. They write, hiking solo through the Appalachians. I'm halfway through my 5th day and everything's great. I'm happier than I've ever been. I decide at some point to set up camp and cook some food. I lay down and read for a bit till I fall asleep. Next thing I know, I'm awake and it feels like it's around 2 or 3 a.m. I hear this stomping and breathing outside my tent. It's obviously human, a man. He's stomping in a particular pattern. Of course, I'm crapping myself at this point. I'm clutching my sleeping bag, almost crying because I've read way too much disturbing stuff in my time. Then I hear a low voice say, hello? I don't say anything, which was a mistake, because I guess he thought no one was home. He starts grabbing for the zipper in the dark, and I flip out in a fit of complete hair-raising terror. I felt this horrible nightmare feeling as I jump for the zipper and start screaming, trying to act like a killer psycho to scare the guy off. Luckily, it worked. I hear him run off into the forest. I cried and left as soon as the sun came up. Just after Christmas in 1980, something strange happened in Rendlesham Forest near 2 US Air Force bases in Suffolk, England. Around 3 a.m. on December 26th, airmen stationed at Royal Air Force Woodbridge saw what they thought was a plane crash in the woods, bright lights descending into the trees. But when they went to check it out, they didn't find a plane. What they saw was a metallic object with flashing colored lights moving through the forest. One of them, Sergeant Jim Peniston, later claimed he got close enough to touch it and believed it was a, quote, craft of unknown origin. He also said the animals on a nearby farm went into a frenzy. By daylight, the airmen returned to the same spot and found 3 small marks on the ground in a triangle, along with scorch marks and broken branches. 2 nights later, Deputy Base Commander Charles Halt went into the forest himself, taking radiation readings and recording everything on a micro-cassette tape. In his memo to the Ministry of Defense, Halt wrote that they saw, quote, 3 star-like objects that moved rapidly in sharp angular movements and sent beams of light down to the ground. Halt, even decades later, stood by what he saw, saying it was something not from this world. In the early 70s, people living around Mount Hiba in Japan started reporting something wandering through the forests. A creature they began calling Hibagon. It was described as a short, stocky humanoid about 5 feet tall, covered in dark brown or black hair, with hands stained white like they'd been dipped in clay. Some said it looked more human than ape. It moved like an animal, but had an almost aware expression, like it knew it was being watched. The first major sighting came in July 1970, when a group of hikers said they saw it standing by a cedar tree. Newspapers picked up the story, describing it as a gorilla-like beast, and not long after, a farmer named Shoichi Ueda reported seeing it, saying it glared at him from the edge of his field before disappearing into the trees. Over the next few years, sightings spread through the area. One driver said it ran across the road in front of his car. Another said it left behind huge footprints near a rice paddy. By 1974, the Hibagon had basically become Japan's own version of Bigfoot. But then, just as suddenly as it appeared, the sighting stopped. To this day, no one knows what people were really seeing in those woods. In 2022, a team of Chinese scientists found a giant sinkhole in Guangxi, China. And when they rappelled down 630 feet, they discovered there was an entire forest at the bottom. 130-foot trees, and there were 3 cave entrances carved into the walls. Chen Lixin, the expedition leader, said the plants were, quote, as high as a person's shoulders. George Venny, a U.S. cave expert, said, "I wouldn't be surprised to know that there are species found in these caves that have never been reported or described by science until now." There you go. Instead of something being found in a forest, just an entire forest discovered in a sinkhole. Pretty cool. All that said, I've been your host, James, and I'll catch you, yes, you specifically, in the next video.